Imagine waking up tomorrow morning. It's Monday. Your alarm clock is screaming at you. You slap the snooze button, drag your exhausted body out of bed, and chug a cup of coffee just to feel alive. You check your phone, 50 unread emails, 30 Slack notifications, and a bank account reminding you that rent is due. You get into your car, sit in bumper-to-bumper traffic for 45 minutes, all to spend 8 hours in a cubicle staring at a glowing spreadsheet under depressing fluorescent lights. And as you sit there, rubbing your temples, you console yourself with a single thought. Well, at least I'm not a caveman. At least I don't live in the Stone Age. Those poor ancestors had to run from saber-toothed tigers all day, freeze in dark caves, and starve to death at age 20. But what if I told you that this picture of prehistoric life is completely wrong? What if the history books lied to us? What if, from a biological and psychological standpoint, prehistoric life was actually way more relaxed, less stressful, and in many ways, much easier than your current 9-to-5 grind? What if the Stone Age was actually the last time humans were truly relaxed? To understand this, we have to look at the work week of a caveman. And yes, they had a work week, except they didn't call it work, they called it living. In 1966, a legendary anthropologist named Marshall Sahlins shocked the academic world. He presented a paper with a title that sounded like a joke: The Original Affluent Society. At the time, economists assumed that ancient humans lived in constant misery, working every waking hour just to find food. Sahlins looked at the data and said, actually no, they were the most leisure-rich people in history. Sahlins and later anthropologists studied modern hunter-gatherers like the Hadza of Tanzania and the Jew/Huansi of the Kalahari Desert. These groups still live much like our ancestors did for 99% of human history, and the researchers found something mind-blowing. To secure everything they needed to survive, food, water, shelter, and tools, the average hunter-gatherer only worked about 3 to 5 hours a day. That's it, between 15 and 25 hours a week. Once they gathered enough food for the day, they stopped. There was no boss telling them to increase productivity. There was no concept of overtime. There was no quarterly goal to meet. If a hunter-gatherer went out, found some wild melons and a deer by 11 in the morning, their workday was officially over. The rest of the day belonged to them. Compare that to the average modern worker. We work 40 hours a week at our jobs, but then we have to commute, do grocery shopping, clean the house, cook, pay bills, and manage our digital lives. We easily put in 60 to 70 hours of life maintenance work every single week. We are, by any objective measurement, working twice as hard as a Stone Age human. But what did a caveman's work actually look like? Well, for starters, it didn't involve sitting in a chair. For 99% of human history, work was physically active, highly social, and constantly varied. Foraging, which was how humans got most of their calories, was basically a long, pleasant walk in nature with your favorite people. A group of women, grandmothers, sisters, and children would walk through the woods together. They knew every tree, every leaf, and every root. They gossiped, told jokes, sang songs, and picked berries. It was a social event that kept them fit. Today, we pay monthly gym memberships just to walk on a treadmill next to a stranger who smells like old cheese. Our ancestors did it for free with friends while picking organic blueberries. And then there was the hunt. Hunting wasn't a high-stress, constant battle with monsters. It was a game of ultimate patience and endurance. Humans are not fast, we don't have claws, and we can't bite hard, but we have a superpower. We sweat. Because we don't have fur and can sweat, we can run long distances in the heat without overheating. Our ancestors practiced persistence hunting. They would find an animal, like a kudu, and chase it. The kudu would run fast, but then it would have to stop to cool down. The humans, jogging slowly, would just keep showing up. Run, stop, cool down. Jog, jog, jog. Eventually, after hours of being pursued in the midday sun, the animal's body temperature would rise too high, and it would collapse from heat exhaustion. The hunt was basically a long jog with your buddies, ending with a massive barbecue. And because our ancestors had no refrigerators or bank accounts, they couldn't store wealth. You couldn't hoard 50 deer in your cave. It would rot. So, there was no point in hunting more than you could eat. Greed made no sense. If you caught a large animal, you shared it with the entire tribe. Why? Because sharing was the best way to store food. If I share my meat with you today, you will share your meat with me next week when I come home empty-handed. It was the original social security system built on trust and mutual aid. So, if ancient humans only worked 3 hours a day, what did they do with the other 19 hours? First, they slept. They didn't have alarm clocks or artificial lights forcing them to wake up before dawn. They slept when they were tired, woke up when the sun warmed their skin, and took long, luxurious naps during the hot afternoon hours. Second, they socialized. Humans are deeply tribal creatures. We evolved to live in groups of 30 to 150 people. This is known as Dunbar's number. the maximum number of stable social relationships a human brain can manage. Within this group, everyone was family. They sat around the campfire, which was the original television, and talked. They told creation myths, gossiped about camp drama, sang songs, and danced. Third, they made art. We often think of prehistoric art as crude drawings, but caves like Chauvet and Lascaux feature breathtaking masterpieces. These paintings weren't made in a rush. They required hours of mixing pigments, building scaffolding, and painting by the flickering light of animal fat lamps deep inside dark caves. They carved beautiful flutes from bare bones, crafted intricate necklaces from shells, and decorated their spears with gorgeous carvings. They did this simply because they had the time, the focus, and the passion. Fourth, they played. Adults wrestled, swam in rivers, ran races, and spent hours playing games with children. Childhood in the Stone Age was essentially one long, unstructured playground. There were no exams, no screens, and no social media anxiety, and time itself felt different. In the prehistoric world, time wasn't a resource to be spent, saved, or wasted. There were no minutes or hours. Time was circular, dictated by the rhythm of the sun, the phases of the moon, and the changing of the seasons. There was no Sunday scaries because there was no Monday. There was only today. Now, let's be honest. This channel would be irresponsible if we painted the Stone Age as a perfect, painless paradise. It wasn't. There was a catch, and it was a big one. First, nature is brutal. If a drought hit, or a volcanic winter occurred, food sources would vanish, and the tribe would face temporary starvation. Second, there was no modern medicine. If you stepped on a sharp rock and the cut got infected, you could die of sepsis in days. A simple tooth abscess could be a death sentence. There were no antibiotics, no painkillers, and no emergency rooms. Third, infant mortality was devastating. About 30 to 50% of children did not survive to adulthood. If you survived childhood, however, your chances of living to 60 or 70 were actually very high, and you would live those years in peak physical condition. Archaeologists examining hunter-gatherer bones find that they were tall, strong, and rarely suffered from the chronic diseases that plague us today, like diabetes, cardiovascular disease, or osteoporosis. So, yes, life was fragile, but day to day they weren't living in constant fear. They were relaxed, fit, and socially connected. So, if life was so chill, why did we stop? Why did we leave the forest and build cities? Enter the greatest trap in human history, the agricultural revolution. About 12,000 years ago, humans began domesticating plants like wheat, rice, and corn. We are taught that this was a massive step forward, a triumph of human intelligence. But many historians, including Yuval Noah Harari in his book Sapiens, argue that wheat actually domesticated us. Think about it. Before agriculture, wheat was just a wild grass. Suddenly, humans started spending all their time caring for it. Wheat didn't like rocks, so humans cleared the fields. Wheat didn't like weeds, so humans bent over all day pulling them out. Wheat was thirsty, so humans carried heavy buckets of water from rivers. Our bodies were never designed for this. Archaeologists can track the transition to agriculture just by looking at human skeletons. Suddenly, we see a massive spike in slipped discs, arthritis, hernia, and neck pain. Farming also made us vulnerable. A hunter-gatherer ate over 100 different species of plants and animals. If one species died out, they just ate something else. A farmer relied almost entirely on wheat or rice. If the rain didn't fall, or if a blight hit the crop, the entire village starved. Famine is actually an invention of the agricultural revolution. Furthermore, farming allowed us to store food, and storing food created private property. Once you have a silo full of grain, you have to defend it from other people. This led to the creation of walls, soldiers, kings, taxes, social classes, and organized warfare. We traded a life of variety, leisure, and equality for a life of grueling labor, stress, disease, and hierarchy. So, what is the takeaway here? We can't go back to living in caves. And let's be real, none of us want to give up modern dentistry, antibiotics, warm showers, and the internet. I certainly don't. But understanding our evolutionary past helps us realize something vital. Our modern epidemic of burnout, anxiety, depression, and loneliness is not a personal failure. Your brain and your body were shaped by millions of years of evolution to move active, to live in close-knit communities, to share resources, and to rest. You were never biologically designed to sit in a chair for 8 hours, staring at a glowing screen, isolated in an apartment, worrying about a credit card bill. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by the modern grind, take a breath, step away from the screen, go for a long walk in nature, spend some unstructured time laughing with friends, take a guilt-free afternoon nap. In those moments, you aren't being lazy, you are just honoring your inner hunter-gatherer, and they would highly approve. What do you think? Would you trade modern comforts for a week in the Stone Age? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and stay relaxed.